Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard is a combat veteran with 2 tours of Iraq under her belt, and she's been a very outspoken U.S. politician pushing for peace in Syria. So she decided to put her money where her mouth is. She actually took a secret fact-finding mission to Syria earlier this month, where she spoke directly with the Syrian people on the ground, and she also happened to get an impromptu meeting with Syria's President Bashar al-Assad. Now, on Wednesday, Gabbard went to speak to CNN's Jake Tapper. She defended her decision to go to Syria. She defended her decision to meet with the president of Syria, and she also dared to criticize the U.S.'s policy of funding and arming terrorists that are affiliated with al-Qaeda on national television. Now, the Congresswoman, she was smart about this, okay? So she documented her conversations with these ordinary Syrians so you could see for yourself what they were saying to her. But she documented this trip, and she says that she heard some things that were very different than from what the mainstream media has been pushing about Syria.
Why is it that the United States, its allies and other countries are providing support, are providing arms to terrorist groups like al-Nusra, al-Qaeda, Arar al-Sham, ISIS, who are on the ground there raping, kidnapping, torturing, and killing the Syrian people, children, men, women, people of all ages? They asked me, why is the United States and its allies supporting these terrorist groups who are destroying Syria?
So immediately, Jake Tapper cuts her off and has to go back to towing President Obama's imaginary red line.
Obviously, the United States government denies providing any sort of help to the terrorist groups that you're talking about. They say they provide help for the rebel groups. Tell us more about...
The reality is, Jake,
yeah.
The reality is, and I'm glad you brought up that point, because this is an often talked about thing. Every place that I went, every person that I spoke to, I asked this question to them. And without hesitation, they said there are no moderate rebels. Who are these moderate rebels that people keep speaking of?
Exactly. Who are these moderate rebels? There are no moderate rebels. They do not exist. We have been reporting on this for years, pointing out the fact that these so-called moderate rebels have been defecting to ISIS. They say that ISIS is the group that's in power there on the ground, or whatever other terrorist organization has more power, more money there on the ground. They're defecting to those groups. They're bringing them U.S. weapons, and, oh, by the way, they're U.S. training as well, because they're not loyal to the United States of America. And so rather than look at this issue and say, wow, here is a Democratic, progressive Congresswoman who went to Syria and spoke directly with the Syrian people, and she's bringing this message of, hey, you know, we need to stop arming and funding terrorists and really look at what's creating this refugee crisis in the first place. We need to pull back from that. This is a message that the Democrats, you know, I thought they were very much anti-war, but rather than get behind her, they are bashing her left and right. She talks about the fact that this regime change is what has led to this mass refugee crisis, not only in Syria, but in other countries as well. You know, when Hillary Clinton and President Obama wanted to take out Gaddafi, for instance, or of course, starting with Saddam Hussein in Iraq. So a lot of this regime change is counterintuitive to what America really would desire there in the Middle East. But this is the problem. The protesters don't see that. They just think that Donald Trump is a racist, sexist, homophobic mini Hitler for imposing this travel ban, because he's making this decision having to clean up the mess that was created. So instead of looking at Tulsi Gabbard's fact-finding mission as enlightening and important, they're going out of their way to bash her. We have the mainstream media, the pundits, these officials, they're all coming out attacking her, trying to smear her trip, and also bury this story altogether. So immediately the Daily Beast comes out slamming her with the headline, "Tulsi Gabbard's fascist escorts to Syria." And they go into this whole hit piece about how these guys are affiliated with some unknown anti-Semitic group. Meanwhile, you know, they're not going to talk to you about Hillary Clinton and her top aide Huma Abedin and their ties to Hamas and these other, the Muslim Brotherhood, et cetera. That's, you know, that's an issue. Tulsi Gabbard went with these fascist escorts to Syria. We have former House of Representatives National Security Advisor Evan McMuffin tweeting that Tulsi Gabbard enjoys the support of Putin's propaganda propaganda network in America simply because RT ran a story about the trip that she took. So now all of a sudden she's a Putin stooge again. And then Washington Post comes out with this article saying that her trip undermines Washington's broader policy deliberations about how to approach Syria. So she dared to go there by herself and see with her own eyes that what President Obama, what former Secretary of State John Kerry was saying about what was going on in Syria, it wasn't true. It wasn't true. And so the establishment media is freaking out, trying to toe that red line, because they would rather people not know that the U.S. is arming terrorists, moderate rebels, arming them to the teeth. These are people who are raping, kidnapping, torturing, and killing the Syrian people, destroying their country, because those groups are working to overthrow Assad. So it's kind of the enemy of my enemy is my friend there. That's something that the globalists want. So they're willing to overlook what those groups are doing to the Syrian people and then lie to you and I about how our taxpayer dollars are being spent to push this regime change. And they're also going to try and make you and I feel guilty about not opening up our country's borders for these refugees when it's these policies that are creating the refugees. They don't want to talk to you about that. They don't want to tell you the truth. But the Syrian people want us to stop bombing the hell out of their country and arming and funding these terrorist groups that are doing just the same. So as Tulsi Gabbard said, by visiting herself and speaking directly with the Syrian people, she says our counterproductive regime change war does not serve America's interests. It doesn't serve anyone's interests around the globe who is worried about this refugee crisis, worrying about the safety, their national security. It's very counterproductive. And you'll recall earlier this month, Tulsi Gabbard actually introduced the Stop Arming Terrorists Act, which would prohibit the U.S. government from using American taxpayer dollars to provide funding, weapons, training, and intelligence support to terrorist groups, as well as countries who are providing direct or indirect support to those same groups. So this is someone who's very passionate about bringing peace to Syria. She's willing to put her money where her mouth is. She's willing to take the trip, get on the ground with the Syrian people. But the Washington Post and all the other people there in the mainstream establishment that are towing the line for the globalists, they want to smear her and smear someone who, when you stop trying to go to the left-right divide and see what is it that we can all agree on, I think we can all agree on stopping war and ending these endless wars that President Obama has had us in for every year of his presidency. This is something that we can all agree on, and yet the establishment mouthpieces will say that it is undermining Washington's approach on how to deal with Syria. Absolutely insane, but this is the truth. This is what you need to know. This is what you're only going to find out here at Infowars.com or from great people like Tulsi Gabbard, who are not afraid to go out on national television and let Washington know that they're doing it wrong and the American taxpayers need to wake up.
I ain't turning down nothing but my couch. Want that truth out. I'm trying to give it to the world before it burn up. I only know one way. Turn up.